Victoria, raised me since I was a child. I developed an unspeakable love for her. But on the day I was about to confess, she introduced me to her fiancé, Ed. My heart shattered, but I could only offer my blessings. However, just as I was about to give up, I accidentally discovered that Ed, Ethan Ito, frequented high-end clubs and dated young models, a notorious gold digger. Enraged, I told Victoria the truth, but she refused to believe me, accusing me of slandering her perfect man. Ethan even mocked me, saying, "Everyone knows about your dirty little secret for your aunt, but you're only good enough for my leftovers." However, unexpectedly, my alter ego awakened in my moment of anger. It's mine, and nobody can take it. I had only made one wish for my 18th birthday, but the moment I stepped into the house, I knew it wouldn't come true. The room was warmly lit, and the woman who had raised me for 10 years was intimately embraced by a man. Hearing the door open, Victoria turned around and said, "You're back. I've been waiting for you to have dinner." The man smiled and said, "You must be Sebastian. No wonder your aunt talks about you all the time. You're quite handsome." I forced a smile and said, "Hello." Victoria took the red roses and cake from my hands and introduced, "This is Ethan Ito, my fiancé." With a deafening boom, I felt something break within my chest. I stood there, staring at Victoria's beautiful face, my mouth opening and closing, unable to speak. Ethan laughed. "Sebastian, are you planning on confessing to some girl from school?" I bit my lip. "No. This cake, I spent a week learning how to bake it. It double was. A confession gift for Victoria." The atmosphere suddenly turned cold. Victoria frowned, seemingly displeased with my coldness. She called out, "Sebastian!" Snapped back to reality by her voice, I clenched my fists. I stammered, When did this happen? It's just a bit sudden. I didn't realize." Ethan sighed. "Almost 3 months. Your aunt didn't tell you because she was worried about your college entrance exams. We've been planning our trip and engagement." Ethan continued. "Sebastian, is there anywhere you'd like to go?" Victoria said. "He's still a child. He probably wouldn't want to go with us." Victoria added, "Sebastian, you just finished your exams. Where would you like to go with your classmates? I'll give you the money." Hearing them use we and us, my hands behind my back trembled uncontrollably. I couldn't stay any longer. I stepped forward, took back the roses and cake, and turned to leave. Trying to control my emotions, I said, "I don't feel well. You two go ahead and eat." I quickly ran downstairs, afraid that my bitter jealousy would show on my face. This apartment, a luxury penthouse in the city center worth millions of dollars, was a gift from Victoria when I was in middle school, located directly below her building. Since my parents died in a car accident when I was 10, and Victoria, my father's cousin, took me in, she'd been incredibly generous, giving me everything. But I was too greedy, wanting more. The most ridiculous thing was that I actually thought I could have it. The room was dark, only illuminated by my phone screen. 1, 2, tears fell, blurring the picture of a smiling woman and young boy. I raised my hand and slapped myself hard. The loud sound echoed in the empty room, a harsh punishment for my years of delusion. After what felt like forever, the inner struggle and pain subsided. Victoria would probably never know when I stopped calling her Aunt Vicky. The change in my address concealed the unspeakable emotions and pain in my heart. My head began to ache, but I endured the discomfort, took a picture of the cake on the table, and wrote a sentence on the back. 18, I lost my beloved. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Victoria. In a tone of elder-like concern, she said, "Ethan specially made all your favorite dishes. You shouldn't have left. Are you feeling unwell? Should I call a doctor?" She urged again. "Sebastian, reply." I emotionlessly turned off my phone, holding my head, feeling as if it were about to explode. "No, I can't do this." Stumbled into the bedroom, frantically searching the medicine cabinet. All I could hear was my own pounding heart and ragged breathing. The moment I swallowed 3 pills dry, A woman's voice echoed from behind me. "What are you taking?" My hand trembled violently. One pill rolled to Victoria's feet. She picked it up and approached me step by step. I pinched my brow, stood up nonchalantly, and said, "Vitamin C, I have a bit of a cold." In the moonlight, Victoria saw the German writing on the bottle. Indeed, it meant vitamins, and relaxed. She flipped on the light switch. My bloodshot eyes and messy hair were instantly exposed. Victoria frowned, reached out to touch my forehead, and asked, "Feeling that bad? Should I call the family doctor?" I leaned away, saying, "No, I'll just sleep it off. Tell Ed I apologize. I really have no appetite today." Her hand paused midair. She said, "You're calling him Ed so casually now. A moment ago I thought you disliked Ethan." I shook my head. "He's your fiancé. It's enough that you like him." Victoria sensed my subtle resistance. She ruffled my hair and said, "Sebastian, don't overthink it. Even if I get married and have children, I'll still love you like before." I looked up. My emotions felt like they were about to explode. I desperately wanted to ask, "If that's true, can you love me too? Can you stop treating me like a child? I've grown up. I can protect you." But ultimately, I only lowered my head. She already had a lover. I was too late. Victoria helped me sit on the bed and poured me a glass of milk. She said, "Since you're feeling unwell, get some rest early. Haven't asked you yet. How did your exams go? Which university are you thinking of applying to?" My throat felt like it was being sliced. I whispered, "I haven't decided yet." The truth was I'd already decided to go to the US. Before, I wanted to stay, clinging to the ridiculous fantasy of ending up with Victoria. Now I wanted to leave, fearing I'd lose control of my emotions and do something irreversible that would make Victoria disgusted with me. Seeing Ethan earlier had already made me very unstable. I wasn't sure if I could handle seeing them constantly together. I might actually go crazy. I just wanted to preserve my dignity and composure in front of Victoria. This illness, Victoria must never know. Victoria, unsuspecting, said, "Okay, take your time." Then she tucked me in and turned to leave. Before leaving, she said, "Tomorrow, Ethan and I are having dinner. You should join us." I nodded. "Good night, Vicky." The next day, Victoria hosted a banquet at the Grand Regency. Relatives and friends filled the private room, their smiles radiating genuine blessings. Only I felt detached, unable to eat. Suddenly, Victoria gagged while eating. Someone immediately teased, "Sister-in-law, could you be expecting?" "Ethan's amazing," another chimed in. Watching Victoria blush and snuggle into Ethan's embrace, my eyes welled up. I hastily stood, saying, "I'll go to the restroom." Everyone was focused on the happy couple. Nobody noticed my departure. I hid in a stall, took 3 more pills, and finally mustered the courage to return. But as I passed the restaurant entrance, I froze. Ethan was outside, embracing a strange woman. My hands and feet went cold. I quickly took a picture. Back in the room, just as I was about to speak, Ethan returned, kissing Victoria's cheek. I clenched my fist, hiding my phone. That evening, I nervously knocked on Victoria's door. Ethan wasn't there. I couldn't hold back any longer. I urgently asked, "How did you meet Ethan? Do you know what kind of person he is?" Victoria frowned slightly. "What is it? What are you trying to say?" Trembling, I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture. "Don't let him deceive you." Victoria snatched the phone, her expression turning cold. "Sebastian, when did you become so fond of slandering others?" I was shocked. "I saw it with my own eyes. He has another woman. Don't you believe me?" Victoria tossed the phone back. "That's Ethan's cousin, he told me." I was speechless. "Cousin?" I clearly saw him touch that woman's behind. I just didn't capture that moment. I exclaimed, "You believe whatever he says? He's deceiving you." Victoria got angry. "Ethan is the man I've chosen. Of course I have faith in him." I was stunned. Yes, they were husband and wife, one unit. And I, just a child without blood ties, a 10-year burden she carried. Of course she'd believe Ethan, not me. Victoria added, "What's wrong with you? You've been acting strange these past 2 days." The words acting strange sent a chill down my spine. I numbly raised my hand, realizing I was trembling uncontrollably. How could this be? I'd already increased the dosage. Panic seized me. I stammered, "Okay, you understand. I'm fine. I'm going home." Saying this, I turned and ran. The moment I got inside, I received a text from Victoria. She said, "Don't tell anyone about this. He'll be angry." I numbly typed, "Sorry." Victoria didn't reply. A week later, the college entrance exam results were released. As a basketball scholarship recipient, my scores were high enough for the best universities in the country, but I knew I wouldn't stay here. Watching Victoria fall in love with someone else was more painful than death. 7 days later, the woman who had been absent reappeared at my doorstep. She wore an elegant dress, its hem swaying gently, outlining her graceful figure. "Victoria," smiled, "I checked your scores. You did great. Vicky will take you out to celebrate." A simple sentence filled me with unexpected joy. I quickly washed my face and fixed my hair. However, as I reached for the passenger side door, Victoria said, "Sit in the back. We're picking up Ethan first." I stood there, a lump in my throat, my heart sinking. "Wasn't this supposed to be a celebration?" I asked. "Why are we?" Victoria shrugged, finally conceding. She called Ethan, saying they wouldn't be seeing him today. Victoria frowned slightly, rolled up the window, and made her decision. "Sebastian," she said, "you're prejudiced against Ethan. I don't want to talk about it anymore." I just smiled ambiguously. Victoria sighed. "Don't act like a child. We're family. Do you intend to never see him again?" I didn't mention my plans to go abroad, instead retorting, "I'm not a child." Victoria laughed. "Say that when you find someone you truly love." I turned to her. "Who says I haven't?" Hearing the seriousness in my tone, Victoria was taken aback. After a moment, she asked, "Really? Who does Sebastian like, a classmate?" I smiled slightly. "You, Victoria." Victoria also smiled. "And you say you're not a child? Vicky likes you too. You're sensible and excellent, but Vicky doesn't like you that way." My heart had been pounding. I thought my sudden confession would stir something in her, but Victoria just thought I was being foolish. How ridiculous. I barely ate during dinner. I seemed to have lost my appetite. I absent-mindedly cut my steak, accidentally slicing my finger. Strangely, seeing the blood gush out, I felt a long-dormant excitement surge within me. Victoria immediately held my hand. "Don't move. I'll get you some medicine." As soon as she left, her assistant came in. Seeing his boss wasn't there, he bowed slightly. "Mr. Sebastian, good evening. I'm delivering important documents for Miss V. Could you please give them to her later?" I nodded. As the assistant left, a child ran past, flipping open the file. I caught a glimpse of the contents and my pupils constricted. Victoria was moving the company to another city and had bought a new house there. Was she leaving after her wedding? Was she planning a silent departure? The thought was unbearable. I ran out. In the distance, I saw Victoria leaning against a wall, a bag of medicine in her hand, on the phone. She said, Everything's arranged. The assistant will deliver the documents today." She laughed playfully. "Okay, whenever you want to move, we'll move. It's up to you." "Sebastian," she continued, "I haven't told him yet. It's not important." I laughed silently to myself, wiping away tears. Colorless tears mixed with crimson blood covered me, mirroring my shattered heart. Not important. Where she moved, whether I knew or not, none of it mattered, because I was simply unimportant to Victoria. How foolish I was, only understanding this now. Dazed, I hailed a cab. I didn't want to go home. I told the driver to drive aimlessly, turning off my phone so I wouldn't hear Victoria's voice. The cab stopped in the downtown area. I got out but was hit by a motorbike that ran a red light. The motorbike sped off, leaving me with scrapes and bruises, but I felt no pain, only relief. I thought my illness is getting worse. My other personality is volatile and depressed, always wanting to die. I know that. At 8 years old, I witnessed my parents' mangled bodies. The trauma caused me to develop a dissociative personality disorder. I've told Victoria everything except this. I was afraid she'd have me institutionalized. But now, it doesn't matter. Being locked up or dying. Neither seemed so important anymore. No one cares about me anyway. I took out my phone, sending my transcript and resume to Duke University's basketball team. Since I had to say goodbye to the past anyway, I didn't want to forever be the one left behind. At 10 o'clock that night, I walked home alone. As I reached the bottom of the building, the streetlight automatically illuminated. Victoria stood there, looking exhausted, clearly having waited for a long time. Victoria asked, "Sebastian, where have you been? Why was your phone off? I've been looking for you all day." Seeing my scrapes, she panicked, grabbing my shoulders. "What happened to you? Come home, I'll clean and dress your wounds." Victoria led me into the house. The interior was brightly lit and cozy, yet I felt a chill run down my spine. From the moment I saw her, I remained silent, my gaze fixed blankly ahead. Victoria carefully tended to my wounds and poured me a glass of water. I politely thanked her. "Thank you." Only when I finally reacted did Victoria visibly relax. She knew something had happened to me, something I wasn't ready to discuss. But there was one thing she needed to know. "My assistant told me you applied to a university in America. Why? Why the sudden decision to go abroad?" I stared at Victoria, a complex mix of emotions swirling in my eyes. "Your assistant is awfully concerned about me," I said. Victoria frowned, a hint of displeasure in her voice. Of course, I told him to keep an eye on you." A self-deprecating smile touched my lips. "So it's you who's so concerned about me, huh?" My tone made Victoria uncomfortable. Adding to her unease was my disappearance earlier. Anxiety and worry welled up inside her, making her voice sharp. "Of course I'm concerned about you. What do you mean by that? Are you saying I don't care enough?" I shook my head, my voice low. "No, you're my benefactor, my adoptive parents. Without you, I wouldn't be alive today. I know that." Victoria sighed wearily, a touch of helplessness in her tone. "That's not what I meant. Going abroad isn't a small matter. You should have at least discussed it with me." I set down the glass, my tone flat but laced with irony. "You're moving to another city, and you didn't discuss that with me either. I guess these things don't matter, you just make decisions on your own." Victoria was speechless. The pieces clicked into place. She frowned, her voice barely a whisper. "The documents my assistant delivered today, you saw them." I remained silent, a storm of emotions raging within. Victoria sighed, her voice laced with apology. "I did have those plans. I hadn't gotten around to telling you, but since you've already decided to go abroad, let's not talk about it." She walked into the bedroom and returned with an elegant gift box. "Open it, a belated graduation present." My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a pair of custom-made basketball shoes, embroidered with the Duke University basketball team logo, the shoes I'd always dreamed of. As a child, watching Duke play on TV had captivated me. I'd dreamed of becoming a basketball player and had even naively asked Victoria for Duke shoes. She'd smiled and said yes, but I knew it was unlikely. I thought she'd just been placating me, but here they were. Victoria patted my shoulder, her voice encouraging. "I know you've always wanted them. I kept my promise. Wear them the next time you play. Do you like them?" In that moment, my frozen heart began to thaw. I loved them, thank you. But alongside the gratitude was despair. This woman, who I couldn't help but crave, was a woman I could never let go of. I took the shoes downstairs, placed them beside me, and drifted off to sleep. In my dream, I saw two versions of myself, one timid and sorrowful, wanting to distance myself from Victoria, no longer to be a burden, the other angry and resentful, screaming about destroying her if he couldn't have her. She doesn't love you, you should get revenge. Then I felt myself falling, a terrifying sensation of weightlessness. I woke with a jolt, my eyes opening to a stark white. I was in a hospital bed. A nurse rushed over. "Mr. Sebastian, you're awake. Your wound got infected last night. Your temperature spiked to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. How are you feeling?" I shook my head, my voice hoarse. "Who brought me here?" "Ms. V, but she had a company emergency and had to leave. She'll be back later." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the picture I'd taken of the shoes. Several texts from Victoria flooded in, filled with concern upon learning I was awake. "Finally awake. What do you want to eat? Tell Vicky I'll get it for you. Sebastian, take care of yourself. Don't get hurt or sick again. Vicky is so worried." Tears welled in my eyes. I hugged my phone tightly to my chest, close to my heart. Victoria was a dedicated and admirable person. Everyone had advised her against taking me in, but she'd resolutely shouldered the responsibility of my life without complaint. She was more than just. My dearest love, yet not mine. I am too greedy. I possess nothing, and yet, I wrote it on the screen painstakingly with my finger. High school graduation. You gave me a pair of custom basketball shoes. I'm an adult now. It's time for me to leave you, to let you go. The final full stop. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through my heart. My head throbbed. I forced my leg against the foot of the bed, hard against the worst wound. Once, twice, until cold sweat poured down my skin and the insane impulse subsided. I trembled, dialing a number. "Doctor, your medication. It doesn't seem to be working anymore. What should I do? I don't want to become someone I don't even recognize." A sigh came from the other end. "Sebastian, your condition is beyond the control of medication now. For years I've been secretly seeing a psychologist, trying to appear normal, but heart disease is difficult to cure. You must distance yourself from the person who causes you such distress. Otherwise, there's no telling when you might do something uncontrollable." Night fell, but Victoria hadn't returned. Bored, I was startled by an unwelcome visitor. Ethan knocked, a smile on his face. "Sebastian, how's your recovery? Your aunt is swamped with work and worried about you being alone in the hospital, so she asked me to bring you home." I frowned, uneasy about being alone with him. Ethan, comfortable as always, sat on the edge of the bed, starting to peel fruit. "Sebastian, I shouldn't say this, but you're an adult now. You should understand. Victoria is busy, but she's been worried sick about you lately. Do you think that's right?" My throat felt dry. "No," I managed to croak. Ethan's lips curled upwards. "Good. Our wedding preparations are underway, and she'll be even busier. You won't cause any trouble, will you?" I didn't take the fruit he offered. "You won't cause any trouble at the wedding either, right?" I asked pointedly. Ethan hesitated, a flicker of resentment and apprehension in his eyes, quickly masked by a smile. "Of course not. I'm her husband. I'm going to spend my life with her, and I love her. Why would I make things difficult for her?" I forced a smile, hoping Ethan would keep his promise and protect the best woman in the world from harm. I quickly changed my clothes and left the hospital with Ethan. As we passed a luxury jewelry store, Ethan stopped the car. "Victoria and I picked up our wedding rings," he said, turning to me. "Let's go get them." I instinctively wanted to refuse, but then I thought, the person who will put the ring on Victoria's finger will never be me, so I went in. The sales associate presented the dazzling rings, their brilliance almost blinding. Ethan went to the restroom. The sales associates left, leaving me alone on the sofa, staring at the rings as if possessed by a devil. I swallowed, slowly reaching out, my fingertips an inch from the rings. A sound from behind. "Sebastian!" I flinched, withdrawing my hand like a thief caught in the act. Victoria walked in, amused by my fright. "What are you staring at? Is something wrong with them? How could I possibly have any complaints?" Victoria sat beside me, touching my forehead. My temperature was normal. I asked Ethan to pick you up. Did you get along all right? I nodded, silent. Victoria didn't seem to mind, picking up one ring and slipping it onto her ring finger. My gaze followed. Countless times in my dreams, I'd placed that ring symbolizing a lifetime together on her finger. Victoria glanced sideways. Where's Ethan? Before I could answer, she picked up the men's ring and held it out to me. He's not here, so try it on for him, will you? Selfishness and greed once again clouded my judgment. I reached for the ring that wasn't mine, but I was stopped. Ethan burst in, breathless with surprise. Victoria, you're here. Before he could finish, he took the ring from Victoria and slipped it onto his own finger. He embraced her. My brow furrowed as I fought back my emotions, turning away, not seeing the venomous hatred in Ethan's eyes. After trying on the rings, the three of us got in the car. Sitting in the back, I listened to them discussing their upcoming wedding in mid-next month. A chill ran down my spine. You said the date was, I asked incredulously. The 16th, Ethan replied. We had it calculated, an auspicious day to ensure a long and happy marriage. Ignoring him, I stared at Victoria. You forgot what July 16th means, didn't you? Victoria's eyes were dark. She hesitated. I haven't forgotten, Sebastian. Let me explain. Ethan interrupted. I know, it's Victoria's cousin and your father's death anniversary. Actually, I suggested this. We can't dwell on the past forever. We need to move on, right? We're doing this to give the deceased peace of mind. His words were articulate and convincing. Victoria subtly frowned, remaining silent. I was incredulous and helpless, letting go of the past. Did that mean abandoning me? The driver first took Ethan home. Victoria instructed the driver to turn around and go to the villa. After, getting out of the car, Victoria linked her arm with mine. It's dark here, she said. I have a bit of night blindness. Let me lean on you. I was flattered, greedily savoring the warmth of her fingertips. I asked, what are we doing here? She hushed me and led me into the building. She clapped her hands, and the next second, all the lights came on. I was stunned by what I saw, rows of BMW motorcycles and Maseratis gleaming under the lights. Victoria leaned against a motorcycle, looking like a car model. Do I look good? She asked. I nodded dumbly. Beautiful, very beautiful. Victoria smiled contentedly, took my hand, and led me to a motorcycle. Try riding it, she said. I felt like I was dreaming. I got on the motorcycle, gazing down at Victoria. I desperately wanted to kiss her. Victoria took out her phone, took a picture of me and showed it to me, laughing. Sebastian, you really look like a knight, but you are my protector, my little knight. Sebastian, she said, I know having the date fall on the anniversary must be hard for you. It's been agonizing for me too. But we both need to move on. Not forget, but remember in a different way. I sighed. I understand. This was Victoria's way of making up for the fact that she knew I'd be upset. I nodded. Okay, I understand. Victoria nodded. I knew you were a good boy. All right, get down now. If you get it dirty, Ethan will be mad at me. I was struck by lightning, unable to believe my ears. I asked, what did you say? She said, this is what we're using for our wedding. I knew you'd like it, so I brought you here early. My heart plummeted from the clouds. No, even the abyss would be better than this moment. I couldn't control my emotions anymore. I raised my hand and knocked Victoria's phone to the ground. I gritted my teeth. Are you giving me charity? Thinking I'm some helpless nobody? I don't need your sympathy. Victoria looked puzzled, not understanding why I had become so moody after my birthday. She asked, what nonsense are you talking about? I really don't understand you. What can I do to make you happy? You've always loved these things, haven't you? I fiercely squeezed the wound hidden under my sleeve, frantically got off the motorcycle, pushed Victoria away, and ran. This was too cruel. Every part of me felt like it was being cut with a knife. I ran frantically down the mountain, losing my shoes, my feet bleeding, until I was exhausted and collapsed on a bench by the roadside. The world was vast, but the moment Victoria abandoned me, I was homeless. Perhaps she was used to my late nights out. This time, Victoria didn't look for me. I went home at 5 a.m., packed my things simply, not wanting to live in Victoria's house anymore. Over the years, I'd saved a lot of prize money from various competitions. Before leaving, I hesitated, then took the basketball shoes Victoria had given me. Those false moments of happiness didn't belong to me. I dragged my suitcase to a hotel and booked a room. Soon, someone knocked on the door. It was Ethan. I instinctively wanted to close the door. I didn't want to see him, but Ethan squeezed in. Ethan sat on the sofa saying, "Sebastian, what's wrong with you? Why? Are you here instead of going home? Don't you know Victoria didn't sleep all night? It took me a lot of effort to coax her to calm down." Ethan rubbed his neck wearily. I saw the striking red marks on his neck, and my face instantly turned as pale as paper. That's how Ethan coaxed Victoria? Uncontrollable images flooded my mind, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I rushed to the bathroom to vomit. Ethan followed me slowly, leaning against the bathroom doorframe, looking at me with the disdainful eyes of a clown. Just a little trick was enough to drive me to this state. He had long disliked me, this dead weight. Even if Victoria hadn't let him touch her, so what? She would belong to him, body and soul. Ethan chuckled, crouched beside me, and said, "What's the point of making yourself look so pathetic, Sebastian? Victoria won't even look at you. She took you to see the cars, right? But I didn't like you seeing them first, so she said she'll take them all away and prepare new ones. You only get what I don't want, you know." Tears welled up in my eyes and I couldn't speak. I knew Ethan was not a good person. Why did Victoria trust him so much, be so good to him, love him so much? Ethan then dropped his final bombshell, saying, "Oh, and you told Victoria about me and that woman at the restaurant, right? Guess what? She loves me so much, she said even if I really betrayed her, she'd forgive me." I completely broke down. I couldn't leave her. I could perhaps accept Victoria rejecting me, accept her loving someone else, but I couldn't accept such a good woman being so subservient to someone like Ethan. How could she? In an instant, my expression turned savage, as if someone else were controlling my brain. I went mad, smashing everything within reach. Shards flew at Ethan, cutting his hand. Terrified by my rage, he ran screaming. I could feel my mind splitting in two, a soul inextricably linked to mine threatening to overwhelm me. I was scared. What if I went crazy and hurt Victoria? No, I couldn't. I bit my tongue, the metallic taste jolting me back to reality. Like a zombie, I returned to the bed and picked up the basketball shoes I'd carefully preserved. The joy I felt then was now cruelly ironic. I'd actually thought Victoria would like me. Then my phone rang. It was Victoria. My hand trembled as I answered. Her voice was colder than ice. "Sebastian," she said, "are you insane? Ethan found you, had run away and tried to help, and you injured him. How could you become like this? I'm so disappointed in you. If you don't reflect on your actions and apologize, don't come back." She hung up without a word. I shook my head fiercely. No. Suddenly a furious rage erupted in my chest. My body seemed to move on its own, and I flung the basketball shoes out the window. For a moment I felt a surge of release. Then I snapped back to reality, rushing to the window to look below. The floor was too high. I couldn't see the shoes. What? It wasn't me. It was another me. I didn't want to lose those shoes. They were probably the last gift Victoria would ever give me. I beat my head in despair. If I were normal, wouldn't I have handled everything differently? But now all I wanted was to retrieve that gift. Leaning out the window, I searched frantically. Suddenly, something glinted in the distant bushes below, and there, beside it, stood the figure I longed to see. She looked up and waved. It seemed like she was saying, "Sebastian, I'll take you home." A gentle breeze swept past. I leaped. "Victoria, I'm coming home." In the dead of night, Victoria was jolted awake by a sharp pang of anxiety. She remembered Sebastian. Had she been too harsh? Should she? Should she bring him home in the morning? She got up for a glass of water, but her hand slipped, shattering the cup. Simultaneously, her phone shrieked. Her heart leaped. A frantic female voice cried, "Is this Miss V? Mr. Sebastian just jumped from the building." Victoria's blood ran cold. She dashed out, not even bothering to change out of her pajamas, oblivious to the shards of glass cutting her feet. She raced to the hospital, seeing the red light of the emergency room blazing. She felt a sickening pain in her chest, a pain that made it hard to breathe. Nurses and doctors swarmed around her, thrusting papers at her to sign, among them a critical notice. Victoria's hand trembled uncontrollably, her vision blurring. She signed the most difficult name of her life. "Don't lose hope," the doctor said. Though he fell from the 18th floor, he was lucky. There's a safety net on the 16th floor of the hotel. He was caught. There's still a chance. "Thank you," she whispered. After the nurses left, Victoria slumped against the wall, her eyes bloodshot. She couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. Everything had been fine. What could have driven him to end his life? Infinite regret washed over her. It must have been her phone call. It was her fault. Sebastian had no one else in the world but her. Victoria's despair deepened. She just wanted him to be safe, to live. Then a woman approached, her eyes scrutinizing Victoria's disheveled state. "Ms. V," she said, "are you really just his aunt?" Victoria turned sharply, staring. "Who are you?" The woman smiled nonchalantly. "I'm Sebastian's savior. I found him at the hotel and called the ambulance." Victoria relaxed slightly. "Thank you. What can I do to repay you?" The woman shrugged. "Sorry, Miss V, but the Yu family doesn't need your charity." Victoria was startled. Then she recognized her. Emma, the second daughter of the Yu family, a rival of the V's, although Victoria hadn't taken them seriously. "Ah, Miss Yu, what a coincidence. I owe you one." Victoria had no mood for pleasantries with Emma. She wanted to return to Sebastian's side. Emma didn't let Victoria leave. "Miss V," she said, "you haven't answered my question." "What, Victoria?" recalled Emma's first words, frowning. "Of course I'm his aunt. What are you implying?" Emma smiled. "Nothing. I just wanted to confirm. There are rumors circulating that Vic is playing the Yang Guo and Little Dragon Girl game." Victoria was stunned. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Emma remained smiling. "Where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm just curious." Victoria bit her lip. "It's all baseless gossip. If I hear it again, I'll sue the rumor mongers." Emma waved her hand. "Okay, don't get angry, Vic. But there's something I don't know whether I should say or not." Victoria frowned. "Say it," Emma said. "Even if your concern for Mr. Sebastian is purely familial, have you considered how your fiancé feels? What man wouldn't mind the criticism directed at his woman? Men are possessive, you know." Victoria's eyes narrowed, seemingly realizing something. She said nothing, simply glancing at Emma before walking past her. "Thank you for the warning." Emma leaned against the window, her expression amused, and, an hour later, the operating room lights went off. Victoria, on edge, rushed forward. The doctor's relaxed expression was a relief. "Congratulations. Mr. Sebastian is out of danger. He just needs to spend 48 hours in ICU before transferring to a regular ward." "Thank you, doctor," Victoria said. Bed was wheeled out. Victoria rushed to Sebastian's side. His face was pale, lying still beneath the white sheets. She touched his cheek. It was ice cold. She rubbed her hands together, warming them before placing them on his face, hoping to offer some comfort in his unconsciousness. Looking at Sebastian, she realized how much the mischievous boy from her childhood had grown. After a while, she mustered the courage to ask, "Doctor, what exactly are his injuries?" Luckily, a safety net protected him. His spine isn't damaged. He has a mild concussion and a fractured right arm. The life-threatening injury was a fractured rib that punctured an organ, but the surgery was successful. Victoria remembered his childhood stubbornness, how he'd endured a scraped knee without tears. So many injuries. How much pain he must be in. According to the hotel staff, the doctor continued, some items were smashed in Mr. Sebastian's room. He seemed emotionally unstable before jumping. As his family, you should offer him extra care when he wakes up. Thank you, Victoria whispered, a sharp pain twisting in her chest. Emotionally unstable. It must have been because of her. She was wrong. Her phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, her expression softened, but she still answered. Ethan's voice was energetic. Victoria, are you awake? We're supposed to take wedding photos today. Don't be late. Victoria remembered Emma's pointed words. She looked at Sebastian, still asleep in the ICU, and made a decision. We're not taking wedding photos. We're postponing the wedding. Ethan's shocked gasp was audible. Victoria didn't explain, hanging up. Nothing mattered more than Sebastian. If he didn't want her to marry, she could remain single forever. She wouldn't allow anyone to harm him. Victoria summoned her assistant to the hospital, working remotely while assigning bodyguards to prevent Ethan from visiting. She didn't want to explain anything. It was then she realized how cold she was, or perhaps she had never truly loved Ethan. Sebastian was the only person she truly cared about. 2 days later, Sebastian's vital signs were stable, and he was moved to a regular ward, but he remained unconscious. Victoria believed he would wake up eventually. He wouldn't leave her alone in the world. Sebastian was the kindest boy. A week later, Sebastian opened his eyes. He stared at the white walls for a moment, then turned his gaze to Victoria. After 2 seconds, he closed his eyes without speaking. Victoria was stunned, immediately calling for the doctor. All his vital signs were fine. The doctor pondered. Perhaps he suffered psychological trauma. If the patient doesn't want to see you, family members should give him some space. Heartbroken, Victoria didn't understand why, after escaping death's door, he wouldn't see her. Sitting alone outside the ward, her assistant approached, handing her a phone. Ms. V, this is Mr. Sebastian's phone, left in his hotel room. They forgot to bring it earlier. Victoria nodded, taking the phone. A notification popped up, low storage space. She instinctively tapped it, and the phone automatically opened a file storage. Victoria glanced at the files, then froze. Many audio recordings were inside. The top one dated the day Sebastian jumped. Without hesitation, she clicked play. After a few seconds, she recognized another male voice, Ethan. It was a recording Ethan made during his visit to the hotel. Since discovering his worsening condition, Sebastian had been recording his solitary moments. That day, Ethan had come uninvited. Victoria's face grew colder with each passing second. Ethan had actually whispered those lies to Sebastian. Sebastian must have been driven to his act by Ethan's provocation. Enraged, Victoria stormed downstairs, jumped into her car, and sped to Ethan's house. Ethan, looking forlorn, was shocked to see her, then agitated. Victoria, where have you been? A week without contact? What's the meaning of this? Why call off the wedding? Seeing Ethan's emotional outburst, Victoria's anger flared. She grabbed his collar fiercely. Who gave you the right to talk nonsense to Sebastian at the hotel? I know everything. He never harmed you. You framed him. A flicker of shock and fear crossed Ethan's face, but he quickly grabbed her wrist, trying to embrace her. Victoria, let me explain. I didn't mean to. I was just jealous, envious of how kind you were to him. I couldn't bear the thought of a rival near my beloved. Victoria yanked her arm away, slapping him hard. Sebastian is a child. Ethan, holding his face, snarled. Child. Only you treat him like an innocent kid. Victoria, dare you ask him if he harbors those filthy feelings for you? Victoria's face darkened. Ethan, if you have delusional tendencies, seek treatment. I have nothing to say to a madman. The wedding is off. Don't ever let me see you again. Ethan threatened her. You dare? The Ito family is influential. Aren't you afraid of my parents' revenge? Victoria retorted coldly. They're beneath my concern. She turned and left. Victoria felt no sadness at Ethan's exposure, only the anger of betrayal. She realized she never truly loved him, but why had she agreed to date him? Was it because he shared many similarities with Sebastian, initially creating a sense of familiarity and comfort? Leaving Ethan's house, Victoria immediately called her assistant, severing all ties with the Ito family. At the hospital, Sebastian was having a nightmare, his brow furrowed, his pale face beaded with sweat, his lower lip bitten raw. Victoria gently put down the flowers, rushed to his bedside, took his hand, and whispered his name. Sebastian, don't be afraid, it's just a dream. You'll wake up soon. Hearing Victoria's voice, Sebastian calmed down. Victoria stayed by his side until sunset. I finally woke up. I saw our intertwined hands and almost thought I was still dreaming. Victoria looked at me with concern. You're finally awake. Are you in pain? I shook my head, my voice hoarse. Vicky, what's the date? July 8th, she said. A chill ran down my spine. I forced a smile. I've slept this long? It's so late and you're still here? Your wedding is soon. I'm fine. You must have so much to do. Don't worry about me. Victoria watched my pale smile, her throat tightening. She inexplicably recalled Ethan's insane words about Sebastian and her. Yet, she didn't reveal her broken engagement with Ethan. She said, It's all right. I can manage. Your health is more important now. A deep ache spread from my nose to my heart. Victoria had been so good to me, but after waking up she had no complaints, only concern for my well-being. There was no one better. Now I was alive, the dream had to end. I drank some water, holding Victoria's hand, and said casually, You should talk to Ed about your future plans. Victoria stared at my smile, searching for any hint of deception, but found none. She couldn't tell if she felt relieved or something else. She knew Ethan was lying. Sebastian could never have those feelings for her. Ethan had falsely accused me, and Victoria, without a second thought, had criticized me. Yet, I harbored no resentment. Victoria smiled, affectionately stroking my hair. Don't think about it, she said. Just rest and gain some weight. You're too thin. I nodded. Okay, thank you, Vicky. Victoria frowned slightly. It feels like it's been ages since you called me Vicky, she murmured, a hint of discord in her voice. Just then her phone rang, her assistant reminding her of an important business meeting with a crucial partner. Since I was awake, Victoria could leave with a more peaceful mind. I bid her farewell and lay back down, my body as frail as a sheet of paper. I saw Victoria again the next day. She'd celebrated the successful deal with a celebratory drink the night before and was slightly tipsy. To avoid disturbing me, she hadn't returned to the hospital. A hangover was rare for her, and she had a headache, closing her eyes in the car to rest. She didn't notice the malevolent gaze that followed her all the way to the hospital. My breakfast had just arrived when Victoria entered the ward. I was struggling to eat with my uninjured left hand. I simply nodded to her, too weary to speak. I felt I had little left to say to Victoria. Trying to make conversation, Victoria said, Oh, the hotel sent your phone over a couple of days ago. Did you? Get it? I nodded. Your phone storage seems full, she said. I'll buy you a new one. My body tensed. Did you look at my phone? I asked. Victoria hadn't expected such a strong reaction. She'd only listened to the recording that exposed Ethan's true nature. She respected my privacy. No, what's wrong? She asked, a playful tone in her voice. Do you have some little secret? I thought of the desperate entries in my memo, my resolve to distance myself from Victoria. I shook my head. Thankfully, she hadn't seen them. Thankfully, she didn't know my feelings. It would have been too humiliating. Victoria looked at me. wanting to tell me she wouldn't marry Ethan, but before she could, a commotion erupted outside. "Sebastian, you bastard!" I was startled. A spoon clattered to the floor. Ethan burst into the room, a knife in his hand, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild and devoid of civility. Seeing Victoria with me, sharing a peaceful breakfast, sent him into a frenzy. He lunged towards me with the knife. Victoria had dismissed her security detail after I woke up, believing severing ties with the ETO family would be enough of a punishment and warning for Ethan. Instead, she had driven him to this desperate act. He blamed me for everything, for the broken engagement, for becoming the laughingstock of the city, for his parents' business losses. He blamed Sebastian, believing Sebastian had manipulated Victoria against him. Why did Sebastian deserve Victoria's affections? He didn't. Ethan raised the knife high, aiming for me in. My 18 years, I'd never held a grudge against anyone. This was my first encounter with such violence. In a flash, Victoria, without hesitation, threw herself in front of me, taking the blow to her back. Ethan was stunned. He dropped the knife, screaming, and turned to flee, only to be tackled by security guards. Victoria ignored his cries. Her assistant would know what Ethan had done. He would face serious consequences. Her concern was solely for Sebastian. "Sebastian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" I shook my head frantically, clutching her arm. "I'm fine. You're bleeding so much. Nurse, doctor, we have an injured patient." Medical staff rushed in, taking Victoria away to treat her wounds. Luckily, Ethan hadn't used much force. He probably hadn't intended to kill anyone. The wound on Victoria's back was long but not deep, though it still required many stitches. Ignoring the doctor's orders to stay in bed, I, clutching my injured side, slowly made my way to Victoria's room. My ribs were fractured, piercing my liver. Every movement was agony, but I was so worried about Victoria. I reached the door and saw her lying in bed, surrounded by blood-soaked bandages, a crimson tide. My heart ached. I'd put Victoria in danger again. I remembered my therapist's words. Perhaps leaving Victoria was the best way to protect her. She'd raised me since childhood. Now it was my turn to protect her. I didn't go inside, just sat outside waiting. Victoria came out, dressed, surprised to see me at the door. "How are you out of bed?" she asked. "The doctor said walking would hurt." "Doesn't it hurt?" I shook my head. "You're hurting too," I said. Relief washed over her. "I'm fine," she said, "as long as you're okay." I knew she meant it, but I was more concerned about something else. "Did you and Ethan fight?" I asked. "The wedding soon. What about your wedding after what he did?" Victoria was silent for a moment. "I canceled the wedding. I haven't had a chance to tell you." I wasn't too surprised. If Victoria hadn't done something, Ethan wouldn't have gone crazy. "Why?" I asked. "Weren't you two in love? Why call it off? You don't take marriage lightly." My adult-like tone made her chuckle. We walked back slowly, arm in arm. She sighed. "Sebastian, I know about what happened at the hotel. Ethan said things he shouldn't have. You didn't hurt him. I misunderstood. I apologize." My hand tightened. So it was still because of me. My impulsive jump had put immense pressure on her and affected their relationship. Had I heard the news of the canceled engagement earlier, I would have been overjoyed. Now I just sighed. It wasn't Ethan. It would be someone else eventually. Victoria was so wonderful, she'd have many suitors. I was the most ordinary, and the least deserving of them all. That night, Victoria slept in my hospital room. I couldn't sleep, staring at the moon. Suddenly, I heard her moan. I sprang up, finding her feverish. Infection, surely. I found a fever patch, intending to apply it before getting a doctor. As I leaned closer, she grabbed my hand in her sleep, pulling me closer. Her beautiful face was inches away. I held my breath. Then her lips moved, whispering, "Ethan." I was stunned. After a moment, I laughed bitterly. What was I even thinking? But her face, so captivating. The face I'd cherished for 10 years. The night was quiet, the moonlight transforming the small space into a world for just me and my beloved. Just one kiss? A parting gift from Victoria? That afternoon, I received my acceptance letter from the university in America. Without hesitation, I booked a flight for July 16th, my father's death anniversary, and Victoria's original wedding day. I closed my eyes, then leaned down and kissed her gently on the lips, a kiss as light and fleeting as a snowflake, as silent as my longing and reluctance. She stirred. I flinched, the sudden movement pulling at my wound. Pain shot through me. Victoria opened her eyes, seeing me grimacing. "What's wrong?" she asked, confused. She'd had a nightmare reliving the day's events. In the dream, Ethan had appeared, only to be slapped by her. She'd been about to yell, "Ethan, die!" when I replaced him in her dream. She realized how close I was and instinctively pulled back. Then she felt snow, icy flakes on her lips. Then she woke. I snapped back to reality. "You have a fever. I'll get a doctor." Somehow, watching me rush off, Victoria smiled slightly. At this moment, the one who should be here, she thought, was Sebastian. Days later, Victoria and I were discharged. She insisted I stay at her place, hiring 2 nannies and caregivers. She gave me her master bedroom. I slept poorly, feeling like a thief. Victoria's health was much better. Her wounds healed quickly. She immediately returned to work late into the night. At 2 a.m., I heard the door unlock. Victoria returned from work, accompanied by Tiffany, her best friend and senior assistant. They sat on the sofa discussing business, then personal matters. Tiffany swirled her wine. "Victoria, what's the story with you and the Ito heir? You just broke it off?" Victoria said coldly. "He deceived me." Tiffany laughed. "You're too good to Sebastian. I always said your future husband would be jealous." Victoria scoffed. "Nonsense. Sebastian is like a son to me. How could I not be good to him?" Tiffany replied. "But have you considered? Who would dare marry you now?" "They'd have to contend with Sebastian," Victoria said. "It doesn't matter," Tiffany replied. "He doesn't want me to get married anyway." Tiffany was completely speechless. She couldn't understand Victoria's mindset. Their conversation was overheard by me, who was still awake. Victoria had already figured out that I didn't want her to marry. She even accommodated that. I was truly content. From then on, I would genuinely wish her happiness from the other side of the world, free from my own constraints. Next day, I insisted on moving back downstairs. I single-handedly and with difficulty packed my bags, preventing Victoria from entering my room. Though puzzled, Victoria was extremely busy with work and didn't interfere much. Time flew by. On July 15th, before dawn, I had my luggage sent to the airport and went to the cemetery to visit my father and stepmother. "Dad, Mom," I said, "I'm going abroad. It's always been my dream to go to Duke University. You would be proud of me, wouldn't you?" I had a minor injury a few days ago, but it's healing quickly. It won't affect my basketball. These past years, Vicky has taken such good care of me. I'm so grateful, but I can't rely on her anymore. After visiting my father and stepmother, I wiped my tears, smiled, and left the cemetery. I took a cab straight to the airport. By the time Victoria woke up, I would already be on the plane. A farewell letter to Victoria, timed for delivery, was already sent. "Goodbye, my dearest Vicky." At 7 a.m., Victoria woke up, put on a black dress, and went downstairs to knock on my door, but there was no answer. Victoria panicked. She knew the code to Sebastian's apartment door, entered, but the apartment looked as if no one had lived there, spotless, furniture covered in dust cloths. Victoria's mind went blank. She rushed inside. It was truly empty. Trembling, she called Sebastian, but his phone was off. What did this mean? A sudden departure? Everything had seemed fine just 2 days ago. Where could he have gone? Was he still blaming her, believing the wrong people and misunderstanding him? But she knew she was wrong. A notification sound, an email. Victoria instinctively opened it. The first line read, "Vicky, I'm gone. Please don't look for me. 3 years later, Los Angeles. I'll be substituting for an injured basketball player in a game. Liu Corporation is the main sponsor." I politely acknowledged the crowd and quickly ran onto the court. I've shot countless three-pointers. Each shot felt as natural as my own blood flow. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Everyone was captivated by my skills. But near the end of the game, something went wrong. As the spotlight swept across the audience, I saw a familiar face. From the moment she saw me, Victoria stood up abruptly, crushing her drink bottle without noticing. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her voice trembled as she asked her assistant, "Who did you hire? Is it from the U.S. basketball team?" The assistant was puzzled. "Yes, Ms. V, but we received urgent news this morning that the original player had an accident, so they sent another key player." "But you didn't want to hear about these things, so I didn't report it." This assistant was newly appointed after Victoria arrived in Los Angeles and didn't know the relationship between the player and her boss. Victoria waved her hand, her eyes could see nothing but me. Nobody knew that this scene had appeared countless times in her dreams over these 3 years. She thought of Sebastian. As the game progressed, Victoria walked towards the court and I saw her shock. No one but Victoria noticed my distraction and mistake. Victoria knew I played basketball since childhood, accumulating injuries. I had a habit of twisting my left ankle and I had just twisted it again. Victoria's heart ached. Even after 3 years, her worry and concern were instinctual on the court. I finished the game in a daze. Walking off the court, I took the jacket from the assistant and rushed to the locker room to change and leave. I wasn't ready for a reunion filled with politeness and formality. But as I opened the locker room door, a huge bouquet of Icelandic peony roses was presented before me. Surprised, I looked up. "How did you get here?" I asked. "Emma placed the flowers to the side. You came back to the country without telling me. I was bored and missed you, so I came to find you. I was used to this young lady's clinginess." "Please," I laughed. "I'm going back to America tomorrow after the game." "I'm not settling here, but I'm still worried," she said. "What if some female fans snatch you away, you handsome guy?" Emma's chatter eased my anxiety. It had only been 3 years since. I met Emma in America, where she was studying finance near my school. One day, Emma was mugged and hit by a speeding motorcycle gang. I kindly took her to the hospital. From then on, she clung to me, vowing to be my servant for life to repay my kindness. We became inseparable friends for 3 years. Many times she brought me an umbrella in the rain. She took me to the hospital when I had a high fever late at night. She even witnessed my dissociative identity disorder. In a foreign land, we relied on each other in a way. Seeing me finally smile, Emma gently pulled me to a chair and asked, "What's wrong? You were spacing out even near the end. Did you twist your ankle again?" I was surprised. "You can tell," she said. "Of course. Is there anyone in the world who knows you better than I do?" Without a word, she helped me take off my sneakers, took out an ointment from her bag and carefully applied it. I didn't dodge after all. I had taken care of her many times when she had a stomachache. But is there really no one in this world who understands me better than Emma? A sudden emptiness filled my heart. Once there was, but now we no longer exist in each other's lives. Victoria rushed backstage after her performance, but she was stopped by numerous important people eager to chat. With cameras flashing, she couldn't afford to be too flustered and could only hastily respond to them. However, she was ultimately too late. In the dimly lit corridor, she saw the scene inside my dressing room, a woman bending over, smiling as she applied ointment to me, and I naturally reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The previously ignored pain returned tenfold. Victoria looked down at her cut palm, suddenly afraid, too afraid to approach. Hesitating, she missed her chance. A commotion arose behind her, reporters with cameras and microphones, eager to interview me. Seeing the outsiders, Emma instantly reverted to her fangirl persona, standing beside me, handing me the microphone and water. Victoria stood in the shadows unnoticed. A reporter asked, smiling, "We've heard that Mr. Sebastian and Miss Emma Yu have a very close relationship. It's truly better to see it firsthand. When can we expect the next step?" Emma, raising a playful eyebrow towards the camera, said, "I've been pushing for marriage many times. Mr. Sebastian says it's too early." I listened to him. I was startled, but without showing it, I glared at Emma. However, from a third-person perspective, it clearly looked like we were exchanging loving glances. Outside the door, Victoria stood frozen in shock, unable to believe her ears. She recognized the woman beside me as Emma, the one who saved me at the hotel all those years ago. She wondered, when did they meet? When did they get together? A dizzying wave of separation anxiety, 3 years overdue, washed over her. She realized that in Sebastian's heart she was no longer superior. The pride Victoria had carried for 32 years was suddenly dwarfed. Inside the room, the interview continued harmoniously, filled with laughter. But Victoria could no longer muster the courage to cross that threshold. She closed her eyes, threw the bouquet in the trash can, and turned away. Exhausted after the interview, Emma dismissed her assistants and sent me back to my hotel. As we reached the underground parking garage, we heard a conversation. Several workers were gathered around a Range Rover, apparently having car trouble. My heart inexplicably skipped a beat. A Range Rover. My favorite car as a child for its powerful name. Victoria had driven one for years, even though many said it didn't suit her. She simply said her nephew liked it. I don't know if there's such a thing as telepathy, but I involuntarily turned my head and saw that familiar, graceful figure across the way, vaguely visible in the dim light. Everything else faded into the background, only that woman, long absent, shone brightly, my aunt, Vicky. Emma acutely noticed my pause, followed my gaze, and realized who it was. Her brow furrowed imperceptibly. "What a coincidence," she muttered. She asked, "Do you know her?" I seemed not to hear, remaining stunned, staring straight ahead. Then a man in a suit by the Range Rover shouted, "Miss V, the car's fixed." Victoria sighed deeply, slowly stepping out of the shadows, meeting my gaze. She curved her lips into a slight smile, tucking her slightly trembling hand behind her back. She said, "Sebastian, long time no see." I finally snapped out of it, hastily averted my gaze, and murmured, "Vicky." Emma raised an eyebrow, letting out a surprised, "Oh." "So it's the famous Vic," she said. "What a lucky coincidence to run into you here." Victoria completely ignored her, her eyes fixed on me. Her voice was soft, as if afraid to scare something away. "Sebastian," she asked, "when did you get back?" "Just today," I replied. "Vicky, what are you doing here?" Victoria smiled. "Well, I'm hosting this event." It clicked instantly. I inevitably thought back to 3 years ago when Victoria had secretly planned to move to Los Angeles with her fiancé. So even though the wedding didn't happen, she was still keeping her promise to her fiancé. She came to LA alone, still silently remembering him. Realizing I was getting worked up, I pinched my palm hard, leaving a deep crescent-shaped mark. Why was I thinking about this? It's none of my business. Emma noticed my action and tensed. She knew this was my way of showing distress. Instinctively, she grabbed my hand, gently separating my stiff fingers before clasping them tightly in hers. The warmth from her touch brought me back to reality. I smiled gratefully at Emma and introduced them. "Emmy, this is my aunt, Victoria. It seems you two know each other." Before I could figure out how to introduce Emma, she spoke up. "Wow, Sebastian, you have such an impressive aunt. Why didn't you ever mention her before?" She extended her hand to Victoria. In that case, I should call you Aunt Vicky too. I hope you don't mind. Victoria suddenly coughed violently, then gently shook hands with Emma. Her voice was low. No. Emma's words were clear. First, I hadn't mentioned Victoria in 3 years. Second, by calling Victoria Aunt Vicky together, we were solidifying our relationship as a couple, and I didn't object. Yes, I hadn't refuted it in front of all those reporters. Why would I clarify anything to her now? After all, she's the least important person in my life now. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left so decisively 3 years ago. Victoria stared at our intertwined hands, a strange feeling of breathlessness washing over her. She shook her head, ignoring the discomfort, and extended an invitation. It's been a while, she said, since we've run into each other. Let's have dinner together. I wanted to refuse, but Emma readily agreed. I didn't want Emma to know about the tension between Victoria and me just yet, so I reluctantly agreed. Emma held my arm as we walked towards the car. I know a great Japanese restaurant nearby, she said. Victoria paused. He doesn't eat raw. Before she finished, I cut her off. That's fine. I haven't had Japanese food in a while either. Victoria watched them leave, hand in hand, a lump in her throat. Sebastian hated raw food, didn't he? How? Could things change so much in just 3 years? Only after we entered the restaurant did I understand what it meant to feel like a fish out of water. This was all unplanned, both physically and mentally. I wasn't prepared to have a civil conversation with Victoria. My eyes kept straying towards her face, a face I hadn't seen in person for too long. 3 years hadn't left a mark on Victoria. It had only added a more alluring layer of maturity. My heart, however, was a roller coaster, searching for a resting point. It was because of her. After my suicide attempt 3 years ago, my illness didn't reappear until I flew to America. I foolishly thought that near-death experience had killed the other personality, but when I repeatedly woke up crying from nightmares, finding myself self-harming, I realized it was far from over. But I have no regrets about leaving Victoria. If I had stayed, I fear I might have woken up one day to find myself having cut Victoria's throat. That's the nightmare I fear most. Emma picked up a piece of sashimi for me, interrupting my thoughts. I swallowed it quickly, the wasabi burning my throat and bringing tears to my eyes. Victoria's body moved faster than her mind. She immediately poured me a glass of warm water. Emma did the same. I hesitated for a split second before taking the glass from Emma, then awkwardly smiled at Victoria. A satisfied smile graced Emma's face. Ms. V is such a kind elder, she said. On such a lovely evening, she's not with her fiancé, but here with us. My hand trembled. The scallop on my chopsticks almost fell. I didn't even know Victoria had a fiancé again. Was it the same one or someone new? After I moved to the U.S., I blocked all news related to Victoria. It wasn't that I didn't want to see it, but that I dared not. I was afraid that if I did, my longing would become unbearable. Days without her had driven me back. Everything was undone. Victoria noticed my grim expression, unsure if Ethan's past actions still haunted me. She immediately frowned and explained that my engagement to Tyler was purely a business arrangement. It was a contractual union. The LI family needed the BI family's technology, and Tyler wanted his father's inheritance. 2. Ambitious people joining forces, a mutually beneficial deal. But Emma was here, and Victoria couldn't elaborate. So, it's really someone else, I thought. I knew it. Victoria would eventually have a new fiancé. I smiled, picked up my tea, clinked glasses with Victoria, and said, I'm sorry I missed your wedding 3 years ago. This time please send me an invitation. If I'm free, I'll definitely attend. Victoria opened her mouth, unable to speak, and drained her sake cup. She thought, Sebastian doesn't mind my getting married, and I can contact him again. Didn't he say he was tired of living under my protection when he left? 3 years have passed, and he's changed his mind. Victoria had 1,000 questions, but Emma's presence prevented her from expressing even a simple thought. The dinner ended hastily. Emma, arm in arm with me, walked ahead saying, "I checked. The hotel's hot springs tonight are amazing. Let's go soak." She was interrupted by an urgent voice from behind. "Sebastian!" It had been so long since Victoria had called my name like that. My heart lurched. I turned around, still unable to meet her eyes. "What?" I asked. Victoria's lips moved, unsure what to say. Hearing Emma's words, her mind was filled with images of the two of them in the hot springs. Are they sharing a room? Or even a bed, she wondered. Victoria knew this thought was absurd. If they were a couple, they wouldn't need her permission, but she couldn't accept it. She thought 3 years of separation would ease her feelings for Sebastian, but seeing him again only intensified her possessiveness. She cautiously said, "Since you're not married yet, be careful. Avoid being photographed by the media and causing unnecessary trouble." My anger flared. I could never forget the searing pain 3 years ago when Ethan came to me with a neck full of hickeys. What right did Victoria have to lecture me? She'd done everything, and yet she dared to criticize me. A long-dormant, destructive impulse surged within me. I glared at Victoria coldly. "That's none of your business. You haven't been my guardian since I turned 18. Victoria was stunned. She never imagined hearing such cold words from me. "Sebastian, that's not what I meant," she said. My anger only intensified at her frown. "I don't care what you meant," I snapped, pulling Emma into my sports car. Emma shook her head at Victoria, seeming helpless. Victoria stood there, watching the car speed away. 3 years had changed some things, but not everything. She still annoyed me. After driving a short distance, the car stopped. Emma quickly handed me a bottle of water. "Here, take your pills. You clearly weren't yourself just now." My chest heaved violently. Trembling, I pulled out my medication and swallowed it. The pills were perhaps too large, catching in my throat, bringing tears to my eyes. Emma, seeing my vulnerable profile, tightened her grip on my arm, then nonchalantly said, "Haven't you been controlling yourself well lately? Why are you acting up around your aunt?" I didn't speak, only shaking my head. Back at the hotel, we each took a suite. Emma, under the pretense of concern, tried to enter my room, but I slammed the door shut, coldly ordering, "Get out." Emma was rebuffed. My temper was up. No one could stop me. Inside, I frantically searched for something. I rushed into the bathroom, found a disposable razor, and, lifting my shirt, slashed my stomach. Blood flowed, staining the area. I looked at the pale, deranged face in the mirror, the blood on my hands, and felt like a devil. 28 scars, shallow and deep, large and small, each one a marker of my insane desire to return to Victoria, a reminder I inflicted upon myself in America. Pain was my only friend. I carried a first aid kit for this very purpose. At 2 a.m., still awake, I changed clothes and went downstairs to dispose of the blood-stained garments. I didn't want anyone to find them in my room. The night view was nice, but I hadn't expected to see. I encountered her again on the street outside the hotel. Seeing the familiar car, Victoria leaned against the door, lost in thought. Caught off guard by my appearance, she hastily lowered her gaze, a look of awkward embarrassment washing over her. "Sebastian," she said, "I was a little worried about you, so I came to check on you. Don't be mad, I'm leaving now." Watching her under the streetlight, her distress evident, my heart softened. This was the woman I had loved for so many years and still loved, even though our fate dictated distance. I had endured 3 years of this. Stealing a little time alone on such a cold night, was that too much to ask? After all, it was Victoria who sought me out. I sighed, the breath forming a faint white cloud in the air. "It's okay," I said, shaking my head. Before I could say anything else, Victoria's face paled. Her eyes fell on my blood-stained clothes. Her voice changed, sharp with alarm. "Sebastian, what happened to you?" My hand trembled. I hadn't disposed of the clothes yet. quickly knelt, picking up the now dried garment. I saved an injured kitten at the hotel. That's its blood. I'm fine. Victoria didn't believe me. Forgetting her composure, she grabbed my hand, rolling up my coat sleeve to examine it meticulously. Satisfied that my arm was unharmed, no scratches or cuts, and noticing my gait was normal, she finally relaxed. She was still holding my hand. I hadn't pulled away. Even if I didn't want to let go, her status and our relationship meant she couldn't hold my hand for long. She wasn't sure if I'd be offended. Abruptly, Victoria released my hand. The loss of her warmth left an emptiness in my chest. The urge to cut myself to find some solace and release surged again, but I couldn't. I bit my tongue hard until a metallic taste filled my mouth. "What are your plans?" Victoria asked. "I have a flight to America tomorrow," I murmured, "to resume my studies." Victoria's throat felt dry. "So, you're not coming back?" I looked at her, trying to sound calm. I don't want Tito. Can't. I can't be a burden on Victoria anymore, disrupt her life." Victoria seemed to remember something. "My fiancé, Vicky," I interrupted. "I don't want to hear it. I'm tired. I need to go to bed. You should go home." I waved her off hastily, then quickly walked to a nearby trash can, tossed the clothes inside, and practically ran back to the hotel, as if pursued by a wild beast. Victoria stared after me, her gaze lost. After 3 years, she made a decision. She wouldn't just watch Sebastian's back recede into the distance again and again. She would keep him by her side, sharing her joys and sorrows. If Sebastian didn't want to return, she would go to him. 3 years later, after the Liu Corporation relocated to Los Angeles, a new major initiative emerged, a shift of its focus to the United States. Victoria worked through the night drafting proposals, even calling Tiffany, her senior assistant, to her home for an all-nighter. Tiffany was astounded. "Miss Liu, why this sudden drastic move? You have to tell me," Victoria said firmly. "Because Sebastian's in America. I'm going to find him." Tiffany choked on her water, spraying it onto the carpet. "I knew it. You." Victoria gave her a cold look. "Knew what?" Tiffany dared not speak. The truth was, ever since Victoria had broken off her engagement with the Yi family 3 years ago, effectively ruining them for Sebastian's sake, Tiffany had suspected their relationship was more complicated. But such speculation couldn't be voiced casually. If she guessed wrong, Victoria would surely be furious. And then Sebastian had quietly left. Tiffany watched as Victoria spent the next 3 years living like a saint, detached from the world. It was only early this year that Victoria became engaged to Ty, the son of Mr. B, due to business needs. But for over half a year, they had only met 3 times outside of business dealings. There was no sign of romance. Then Tiffany had a brilliant idea. Victoria was typing at her computer when she felt a chill down her spine. She glanced at Tiffany. "What are you thinking about?" Tiffany grinned. "Nothing. America, huh? I want to go too. I'll go with you." The next day, Emma and I waited at the airport for our flight back to America. Boarding was about to begin, but we still hadn't gone through security. I was distracted, repeatedly staring at my phone. I was waiting for someone. She wouldn't come. Last night, I didn't even give Victoria my new number, let alone tell her my flight time. It was normal for her not to come. I shook my head, deliberately ignoring the pang of disappointment in my heart, and boarded the plane with Emma. I thought that was the last time I would see Victoria. Polite, distant, we couldn't recapture the feeling we used to have. She would marry her fiancé, and I would grow old in America on the other side of the world. It wasn't so bad, but I didn't expect to see Victoria again at the school reunion a month later. The reunion was a big deal. The coach said, "Sebastian, a bigwig from your country will be here today." She sponsored our basketball team. I nodded. "Got it, coach. I'll translate. I won't embarrass you." The coach replied, "Haha, The principal said she's a beauty. I can't wait to meet her. 10 minutes later, I stood at the front of the crowd, watching Victoria step out of a luxury car. Her black suit dress, with its exquisite embroidery and perfectly placed pleats, added a touch of elegance and grace, making her look both capable and feminine. Friendly screams erupted around me. I pinched myself, thinking I was dreaming, but her eyes were smiling as she walked towards me. In front of everyone, she smiled. "We meet again." The coach was stunned. "Do you know Miss V?" I was still dazed, unsure how to answer when Victoria replied in English. "He grew up with me." The coach understood. Childhood sweethearts. Tiffany, standing behind Victoria, rolled her eyes. For the 3 years Sebastian was gone, Victoria had looked like she'd forgotten how to smile. Now that she could be in America, seeing Sebastian every day, she was back to her seductive ways. It was despicable. This reunion only confirmed Tiffany's suspicions. If anyone said there was nothing between them, they were lying. Their eyes were practically sparking. Tonight she would help them break the ice. Tiffany approached me, saying, "Hi, Sebastian. I'm your aunt's friend. We've met before, remember?" I nodded hesitantly. "Yes, Miss Shu, how do you do?" Victoria gently pushed Tiffany away. "Where's Emma?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer. We weren't really a couple. We weren't expected to be together all the time. I said, "She's busy these days. She's not in America." Victoria, commanding as ever, pulled me along. "You're my translator tonight." I complied. I'd promised the coach. As the major sponsor, Victoria had many people toasting and chatting with her. I was still reeling from her sudden appearance and drank quite a bit. Suddenly, Tiffany appeared with a bottle of expensive-looking wine. She whispered, "I got this specially. You won't get drunk no matter how much you drink. Use this." We gratefully accepted, thanking her. Tiffany smiled enigmatically and melted back into the crowd. Soon, it was time for the post-ceremony party. The music was upbeat. My face was flushed, my head was spinning, and I was sweating profusely. I drowsily thought, I only drank Tiffany's special wine. Why am I so drunk? The coach approached. He noticed Victoria's unusual attitude towards me. He knew how dedicated Sebastian was, studying, practicing basketball, and staying home, no time for fun. He knew Emmy wasn't the girl for him. Looking at them, he saw a perfect match. "Sebastian," he said, "everyone's having fun. Why? Don't you see Miss V home?" I nodded, "Sure, coach." Victoria nodded to the coach. She wanted to leave too. Outside the venue, Victoria discovered her assistant and driver were gone. "What the hell?" she muttered, angrily calling them, but they weren't answering. She was furious. Leaving their posts on her first day in America and being unreachable, they were living too comfortably. Even worse, she couldn't reach Tiffany, probably chasing some guy. I worried about Victoria. I said softly, "Let me call a cab for you." "Don't be angry." Victoria frowned. "No, I'll take you home." I hesitated, rubbing my temples and letting out a sigh. "No, I can't. The coach assigned me to escort you back. I can't break my word." Victoria looked at Sebastian's serious expression, her anger dissolving. She thought, "Let Sebastian take me home. I don't think I can hold out much longer." She could distinctly feel the alcohol surging through her system, burning her eyes. She mentally cursed Tiffany. What kind of awful liquor was that? It's incredibly potent. We hailed a cab and sat side by side in the back seat. The heater was blasting. Victoria and I simultaneously felt a wave of dizziness, intense heat, and thirst. Victoria had drunk more than I had, and her reaction was more pronounced. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she impatiently removed her coat. I wasn't faring much better, my gaze vacant as I pressed my burning face against the car window. What's happening to me? Why do I suddenly want to hold Victoria? No, not just hold her, but to hold her hand, to kiss her, to feel every inch of her skin, to be intimately entwined with her. Is this illness flaring up again? I really shouldn't be around Victoria. I dug my fingernails into my palm. Victoria, despite the heat, observed my condition. Seeing my hands shaking violently, she tensed, instinctively reaching out to pry my fingers open. The moment our fingertips touched, we both shuddered. Our hands were equally hot, equally restless, both seemingly harboring a tumultuous tide. With a screech, the car stopped. Victoria's hotel had arrived. The sudden braking caused Victoria to lurch forward. This movement seemed to ignite the fuse of her inner fire. I helped her out of the car. I didn't know what was wrong with Victoria, why her breathing was so heavy, why she was so hot. Was she running a fever? My worry was palpable. I escorted her to her room. I wanted to leave immediately, get the medication from my bag, take more to prevent another episode, to avoid frightening Victoria and shattering what remained of our decorum. But the soundproof door of the presidential suite was too thick. I'd barely stepped inside when it slammed shut. Simultaneously, I belatedly felt something rising within me, clamoring. Before I could even help Victoria to the bed, my legs gave way and I collapsed, Victoria falling onto me. Our bodies intertwined, her burning lips pressed against my neck. My scalp tingled, my mind reeling. I trembled, frantically looking at Victoria. Her eyes were bloodshot. She gripped the carpet, using every ounce of self-control to hold herself up. "Get out, Sebastian," she whispered. "Go home." Victoria tried desperately to prevent us from going further, but it was futile. I was consumed by something. My eyes widened. An unbearable sensation, like ants crawling all over me, overwhelmed me. It was my first experience of this, and I was bewildered. What's happening to me? Why do I lose control around Victoria? I couldn't think straight. Victoria let out a low groan, turned and stumbled toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. It had been tampered with. Remembering Tiffany's malicious smile, she punched the wall in frustration and called Tiffany, berating her. Tiffany, unfazed, replied, "Don't be so stubborn. A night of passion is worth $1,000. You'll thank me tomorrow morning." She hung up. Victoria was furious, but she saw my struggling self-control. She was deeply distressed, but dared not approach me, locking herself in the bathroom. Finally, feeling somewhat composed, she opened the door, only to find me delirious, so hot that I had removed my jacket and unbuttoned several buttons of my shirt. Victoria couldn't bear to look. She was suffering unbearably. She reached for a bathrobe, but the moment she moved, I lunged at her. My lips pressed firmly against hers. "Victoria," I murmured, "is it you?" In that instant, Victoria heard something snap within her, her rationality, her morality. A powerful emotion surged through her, making her acutely aware of why, at the moment of the kiss, she felt happiness, even regret. Perhaps this kiss should have happened sooner. Why had she resolutely decided against marriage? Why, when Sebastian was in danger, had she considered dying herself? Why had his departure left a gaping hole in her heart? Why had the sight of another woman by his side caused her such pain, such jealousy? Why had she followed him to America? Because she loved Sebastian. It wasn't the love of an adult for a child, not the affection she'd professed for so many years. It was love, possessiveness, longing, a desperate need for him and only him. But how could she do this? Sebastian considered her his only family, trusted her, relied on her. Even now, with everything changed. Yes, now Sebastian rejected her. Why else would he leave? Victoria's burning heart was instantly doused with ice water. She gritted her teeth, pushing me away. She said, "Sebastian, you see who I am. I know you're hurting. Bear with it. I'll call an ambulance, okay?" Before she finished, I kissed her again. My eyes were blurry, my speech slurred, but she understood. I mumbled, "I know. You're Victoria. I like you. I really like you." A huge firework exploded in Victoria's heart. She trembled, leaning closer, asking incredulously, "Really?" My lips, pressing against hers again, answered for me. No words were needed. Victoria possessed the boy she loved most. The next day, I woke to blinding sunlight. I instinctively raised my arm to shield my eyes, but found red marks on it, like fingerprints. My mind snapped back. I sat up, wincing at an indescribable ache. My body trembled. I hugged the white sheets, banging my head against the pillow. I remembered last night's dream, another dream about Victoria, but this time far more intimate. While I savored the sweetness, a deep sadness welled up inside me. If Victoria knew what I was dreaming, would she still smile at me? But now, worse than the nightmare was the reality. Scattered clothes, a hotel bed, and a panicked me. It wasn't a dream. I really, with Victoria, no. How is that possible? Or did I get drunk after dropping Victoria off, and with some unknown woman? That would be better. At least better than actually being with Victoria. I slapped myself hard, shivering as I got out of bed and dressed. As I put on my shirt, the door opened. Someone was deliberately treading lightly. I wanted to die. I didn't want to see what my drunken partner looked like. I was already devastated, but what came next was even worse. Because the person who walked in was Victoria, thought I was still dreaming. I raised my hand to slap myself again. Victoria was holding breakfast and a large bouquet of Icelandic glacier lilies. Seeing my state, she quickly set them down and grabbed my hand. I asked, "What are you doing? What's going on?" "Last night, Victoria? Impossible. I must be sick. Where's my medication? Where's my medicine?" I panicked, running around the room like a headless chicken, searching for my pills. Victoria was also flustered. She didn't know what was wrong with me. She asked, "What medicine, Sebastian? What's wrong?" Looking at me, Victoria's cry made me shudder. I slowly looked up at her, tears streaming down my face. Victoria's buoyant heart plummeted. She thought, "He's regretting it, isn't he?" But she couldn't dwell on her feelings. She hugged my arm, asking, "Sebastian, what's wrong? Tell me, please don't do this." I couldn't speak, only moaning in pain, calling out, "Vicky!" Victoria broke down. Since last night, she couldn't bear to hear that name again. She patted my back repeatedly. "Sebastian, listen. Something unexpected happened yesterday. I don't know if you remember, but you said you liked me. Now I want to confirm. Is it true?" I gritted my teeth, frantically shaking my head, unwilling to admit it, yet unwilling to deny it. Seeing my shaking head, Victoria's heart sank further, but she still bared her heart, giving me the choice. She said, "Sebastian, I apologize for yesterday, for everything. I was foolish, unclear about my feelings. Now I'm telling you, I like you. I like you as much as you like me. If what you said last night wasn't nonsense," she asked, "did you break up with Emma? Even if you can't be with me now, give me a chance, okay?" Since hearing her confession, I had frozen. How was this possible? Victoria liked me? Was it the kind of liking I understood? Victoria looked into my eyes, seeing her reflection there. She wasn't sure either. My current state seemed to suggest I wasn't unwilling, but now she wanted to do something else. She asked, "Sebastian, can you kiss me?" My pupils constricted, my gaze shifting. Before I could speak, Victoria chuckled softly. The clear sound sent shivers down my spine, making me flush. She said, "If you don't want to, shake your head, okay?" I felt like I wasn't in control of myself. A sliver of rationality told me to shake my head, that I couldn't go on like this, but a full heart said, "It's Victoria, the Victoria I've longed for." Victoria understood my answer without further questions. She tiptoed and kissed me. This was my first kiss with Victoria while fully conscious. It was indescribable. I felt my soul floating. Victoria gently pulled away. My mind was reeling, and I instinctively leaned in, unwilling to let her go. Victoria chuckled softly. "Not enough," she said with a proud little huff. "You still say you don't like me?" My heart trembled. I finally found my voice. I didn't say that. Finally receiving a positive response, Victoria closed her eyes. Then, remembering something, she opened them, frowning. "You and Emma," she began, but I interrupted. "We're not like that," I said, my voice still low, still slightly dazed. It was just a pretense for outsiders. I was firmly declaring my loyalty to Victoria. Victoria felt a little lightheaded. She mused that Sebastian had grown up beside her, and if he were to have a girlfriend, his standards would be incredibly high. How could he possibly be with that girl, Emma? Thankfully, she wasn't too late. Victoria wanted to be by his side every moment, just like all those years before. I remained obedient, doing as Victoria said. We went downstairs together and bumped into Tiffany, whose dress was disheveled and her face flushed, clearly exhausted from a sleepless night. Seeing us holding hands, Tiffany clapped her hands in surprise, then looked knowingly at us. "Well, Miss V," she said, "was I right last night?" Victoria was annoyed, Tiffany was reckless. Though the result was what she wanted, if anything had gone wrong, if anything had happened to Sebastian, she would have surely slapped Tiffany 18 times. Seeing Victoria's changing expression, Tiffany quickly pleaded, "Oh, please don't worry. It was a good thing, absolutely no side effects. You're giving me such a hard time after I helped you so much. Without me, you guys would be waiting forever to be together." Victoria waved her hand in frustration. "Stay away from me." "All right," Tiffany yawned, heading back to her room. I distinctly heard something else in Tiffany's words. Victoria disliked my gaze lingering on another woman, tightening her grip on my hand. I snapped back to reality and said, "You go ahead, I'll go to the restroom." Then I stepped into the elevator, coming face to face with Tiffany. She asked, "What are you doing? Don't get so close to me. I don't want to be slapped by your Miss V." My hands unconsciously dug into my palms. I stared straight at Tiffany and asked, "What did you mean by what you said earlier?" Tiffany paused, then shrugged indifferently. "You mean about the drinks, right? The ones I got for you two last night. It took me forever to get them. Wasn't it effective? I told you I saw it coming. You needed my help to get together." I understood. My face drained of color. So, everything yesterday was because of the drug, not because Victoria genuinely liked me or felt overwhelmed by her feelings. It was just the effect of the drug. She would have done the same with anyone else, wouldn't she? It was just because I was raised by her that made it more special. Ultimately, it wasn't love, but responsibility. I asked, "So you knew I liked her?" Tiffany hesitated. "Sebastian liked Victoria," she said, meaning she had noticed Victoria's feelings for Sebastian for a long time. But it made sense. If Sebastian didn't reciprocate Victoria's feelings, they wouldn't have gotten together so quickly. Tiffany nodded. "Yes, that's right." I slowly nodded, a wry smile on my face. Even Tiffany, who hadn't met me many times, could see my feelings for Victoria. But Victoria hadn't noticed in all these years? "Okay," I said. "Thank you." The elevator stopped. I pressed the open button and stepped out. The word responsibility weighed 1,000 pounds. I was Victoria's responsibility since childhood, and now I didn't want to sacrifice her life for it anymore. Leaning against the wall, I trembled, taking out the pills from my bag and swallowing many at once. I didn't take the elevator, opting for the stairs. Then I received a call from Emma. "Sebastian," she said, "I'm back in the States. What are you doing? Want to hang out?" I squeezed my eyes shut, making a decision. "The Royce Hotel. Meet me at the back entrance." Victoria waited for 20 minutes in the hotel lobby. When I didn't come down, she tried calling me, but it went straight to voicemail. A terrible premonition washed over Victoria. She quickly rushed upstairs, back to the room, but I wasn't there. In that moment, she felt like she was back 3 years ago, walking into my cold, empty room, feeling utterly hopeless. Victoria stamped her foot and stormed to Tiffany's room, banging on the door. "Where's Sebastian?" she demanded. "Did you see him?" Tiffany was startled. Yes. We chatted briefly in the elevator before he left. Huh, but isn't your room on the 18th floor? Why did he get off on the 12th? What did you talk about? Tiffany replied, Nothing much, just that the wine I had yesterday was good. Before she finished, Victoria violently grabbed Tiffany's skirt. Tiffany retorted, What's wrong? You can't find Sebastian? Hitting me won't help. Just go find him. Victoria's arm finally fell weakly. She seemed to understand. Sebastian had regretted it. He'd chickened out. He didn't want to be with her. Tiffany was at a loss at Victoria's dejected state. She said helplessly, Are you okay? Maybe put up a missing person poster? It's my fault. I shouldn't have said anything. Slap me if you want. Let's go find him now. Victoria frantically ran her hands through her hair, saying, No, it's not your fault, it's mine. Asked Knight why hadn't she resisted. If it had been anyone else, she would have rather died than give in. But it was Sebastian. Victoria still harbored unrealistic fantasies that were inherently sinful because Sebastian didn't want her. That day, Victoria drove countless circles on the streets of Los Angeles, making countless calls to Sebastian, but still couldn't reach him. Her heart was frozen solid, seemingly beyond thawing. Emma and I drove all the way to Milan. She didn't know what was wrong with me. Throughout the journey, I nervously picked at my hands, gritted my teeth. She asked, but I didn't speak, only shaking my head. Emma was extremely frustrated. Why had I become like this after she'd been gone a few days? She searched the news and discovered the root cause. Victoria had also gone to America. Emma concealed the darkness in her eyes. She said, Let's find a place to rest. We checked into a hotel. I made a snap decision to transfer schools. I decided to move to Milan and never return to the U.S. Though Victoria might find me again soon, I could escape for a while. Emma was agitated. She finally couldn't contain herself, grabbing my sleeve. What's wrong with you? Can you tell me? Why are you leaving again so suddenly? As she pulled, my collar came down, revealing the conspicuous mark on my neck. Emma froze, staring intently at it. I instantly felt awkward. She asked, Can you just tell me what's going on? Restraining her anger, remembering the mark on my neck, she was furious. I shook my head. It's what you saw, she shouted. Who? Victoria arrived in America, and the next night you're running away like refugees. You're hiding from her. Is it her? I sighed. Why are you yelling? Yes, it's her. Emma knew Victoria, that vixen, had ulterior motives towards Sebastian. She said, Sebastian, she's your aunt. Does she know? She actually did something so monstrous. I can't believe this happened even after Sebastian had been gone for so many years. My face turned cold. I could never blame Victoria. I stood up, taking a step back, my expression serious. It's not her fault. You shouldn't say that about her. Emma became even angrier. It's not her fault, so you ran away? What do you mean? Is it your fault? Did you sleep with her and regret it? My already fragile mental state couldn't handle Emma's outburst any longer. I angrily said, Yes, it's my fault. What does it matter to you? Victoria said she'd heard me confess my feelings. I knew it was absolutely no lie because in countless dreams, I'd confessed my love to Victoria, whether in pain or joy. I just never imagined that dream would become reality. Emma, having been in America with me for so long, had never seen me lose my temper like this before. She couldn't hold back either, erupting. It doesn't matter to me. Am I nothing to you? You only care about that woman with the surname Lou. 3 years ago, it was because of her you tried to jump off a building, to commit suicide. And now, you sleep with your aunt and run away? How irresponsible are you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like a fragile, withered leaf drifting in the autumn wind. I stopped, leaning against the wall to steady myself. I asked, How did you know? I never told anyone about 3 years ago. Who are you? Emma was stunned. She hadn't expected to say that. Since that's the case, then let's be frank. She had nothing to hide. Seeing me completely crumble, she finally panicked. "Calm down," she said. "Let me explain slowly." I took a deep breath, crossed my arms, and adopted a defensive posture, scrutinizing Emma. Emma sighed deeply and said, "I met you when we were children. You were 8, the year Sebastian lost his father. Right after the incident, young Sebastian was extremely traumatized and his health was very poor. The house felt empty, and he refused to go back, choosing instead to stay in the hospital." Emma continued, "I was also hospitalized at that time. We met in the hospital's first-floor reading room. You don't remember, do you?" I was surprised. His father's death and becoming an orphan led to his schizophrenia. Perhaps it was self-preservation, but I had gradually forgotten those early days and naturally didn't remember a fleeting playmate I'd only briefly met and barely spoken to. I was taken aback. "So," I asked, "the suicide attempt?" Emma cut me off. "You jumped from a building when you were 18. I saved you. I happened to be staying at that hotel that day. When checking in, I saw you and was surprised. I asked the front desk for your room number and took the room below yours. I didn't mean to do anything, I just wanted to be close to you. Because after we left the hospital, you seem to have forgotten me. So for all these years I haven't dared to approach you. But at that moment, I thought it was fate that we met again. If I saw you in the morning, I would greet you and exchange contact information, no matter what. But unexpectedly," here Emma gave a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. I knew what she left unsaid. "Unexpectedly, I didn't make it until morning. I just jumped from the building." I said guiltily, "I'm so sorry." If that's true, I not only forgot Emma but also scared her. I was saved by her and was completely unaware. All these years in America, she had taken care of me so much. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. I thought that after losing my father, the only person who cared about me was Victoria. But it turned out there was also Emma silently watching over me all along. Emma took my hand. "It's me who should thank you. If it weren't for you, I would have died in the hospital as a child." I was shocked. "There's such a thing?" Emma laughed. "Yes. When we were children, there was a serious power struggle within our family. I was hospitalized because someone tried to harm me. They even snuck into my ward in the middle of the night to give me drugs. You saw it and immediately called a doctor, otherwise I wouldn't have lived to see the next day." From that moment, Emma vowed to take care of Sebastian for life. But it seemed she didn't succeed. Sebastian was still hurt by Victoria. I felt a pang of sadness. Perhaps because Emma was connected to that difficult past, I wanted to cherish our friendship. Week later in Los Angeles, Victoria looked haggard these days, like a woman who had been abandoned. Tiffany was walking on eggshells. She didn't know if Sebastian's sudden disappearance was due to her spiked drink, but Victoria said it wasn't the alcohol, it was their problems. She felt Sebastian didn't want to be with her and that if she pushed too hard, he'd be more annoyed. But now she had reached her limit. Victoria composed herself and rushed to the school, only to receive a devastating blow from the principal. "Victoria," he said, "Sebastian has applied for a transfer. We're very sad to see him go, but we respect his decision. He said he's found a new place in Milan." Victoria couldn't even muster a wry smile. So his confession of love that night was a lie. Either Sebastian mistook her for someone else, or she misinterpreted his meaning. Victoria felt a chilling dread. What had she done? After lunch, Victoria aimlessly wandered around campus, lost and directionless. Moving to America seemed to be her own wishful thinking, a burden for Sebastian. She always seemed to do things unnecessarily. 3 years ago, the Lou Group shifted its strategic focus. She wanted a change of scenery. Among many options, Victoria chose Los Angeles because she remembered Sebastian seeing a promotional video of LA on TV as a child and saying it was his dream city. So, she later established her new company's headquarters in LA and bought 2 new houses, one above the other, exactly like their old home. But she hadn't expected his reaction when her assistant accidentally revealed this to Sebastian beforehand. Ethan had been urging Victoria to tell Sebastian earlier, as if he were pressuring Sebastian to commit. It was as if Sebastian showed the slightest reluctance, he wouldn't be allowed to come along. Victoria was naturally displeased. "What do you mean?" she said. "I raise Sebastian. Naturally, he'll go wherever I go. If you had objections, you shouldn't have been with me in the first place." Ethan's face went pale and he apologized profusely. Victoria hadn't told Sebastian because she wanted to surprise him. In her mind, when she told him didn't matter, he wouldn't object to being with her. Feeling increasingly helpless, she received an international call. "Vic, I'm calling to let you know I've received my father's inheritance. Thanks for your understanding and for delaying the announcement of our broken engagement for a few days," said Ty, her ex-fiancé. The call came the morning after she woke up in a hotel room in America. Victoria immediately texted Tyler, explaining she'd found true love and couldn't continue their mutually beneficial engagement. Tyler laughed. "I never would have guessed, Ms. V. You're so cold, but you finally blossomed." Victoria, however, felt only a long-awaited joy. "He's someone I used to like," she thought. Gathering her composure, she said, "Congratulations." Tyler responded, "You sound down. Did your old flame not want to get back together? Did he find out about me?" She choked back a sob. "I haven't had a chance. He left." Tyler said, "Oh, that's too bad. I'll go to America right away." He hung up. Victoria was puzzled. Was Tyler too enthusiastic? They barely knew each other. The next day she received another call. He was already in Milan. "I'm at a sporting goods store alone. I left in such a hurry I have to buy sportswear and shoes. I made amends with Emma. Maybe because we both saved each other's lives, we're closer now. She fell and fractured her ankle, so I've been at the hospital with her. This store's nearby. I came out for some air. A light rain started to fall. Seeing a car across the street and the man getting out, her heart pounded. She instinctively hid behind a tree. It was Victoria. The tall man opened an umbrella for her. Victoria's trembling hands betrayed her as she searched online for Victoria's fiancé. The photos were official, but clearly showed the man with Victoria. "It's none of my business," she thought, "but my heart still aches." After 10 minutes, she cautiously emerged, shielding her face. She'd just passed a restaurant when Victoria turned around, seemingly sensing her presence. "Sebastian!" Victoria called out loudly. He froze, then ran. Victoria pursued, but in her heels she stumbled and fell, a whimper escaping her lips. He gritted his teeth, turned back, and helped her up. She grabbed his arm. "Why did you run when you saw me, Sebastian?" Their eyes met, Victoria's eyes red-rimmed. Was that longing? The rain intensified, soaking them both. Victoria pulled him into her car, turned up the heat, and gave him a towel. He sighed despondently. "Don't you want to see me?" she asked, seeing his distress. He looked down. "Why were you here?" he asked. "I should be asking you that, Sebastian. You left me at the hotel, ignoring my calls and texts. How irresponsible." "Responsible. I left because I didn't want to be a burden." Victoria's face darkened. She didn't understand him, but she didn't dare get angry. She missed him so much, afraid to drive him away again. He shifted. "You should dry off too." A knock interrupted. It was Ty in a bespoke suit. Victoria lowered the window slightly, annoyed. "What?" The assessing look in Ty's eyes felt hostile. He hadn't forgotten Ethan's wary attitude towards him. He adjusted his demeanor, adopting a warm, solicitous tone. "You've been out a long time. I wanted to see if you were all right, my fiancé." Victoria's face drained of color. Yesterday, Ty said jealousy was the best proof of affection. Now she just wanted to. Victoria didn't want me to misunderstand her anymore. She said, "Sebastian, he's a MMI." She trailed off. I forced a smile, then calmly looked at Tyler and said, "I know." "Ed," Tyler nearly choked on his own spit. What the hell? Sebastian and Victoria. He frantically winked at Victoria, trying to gauge if I was truly her love interest. Victoria glared back at him. It all played out before me, taking on a completely different meaning. I straightened my clothes, opened the car door, and said, "I won't disturb you. I'll go." Just then my phone rang. Victoria clearly saw the caller ID Emma. Her temper flared. He'd claimed to love her, and they'd been intimate. He'd insisted he wasn't involved with Emma. But why was Sebastian ignoring her, blocking her messages, yet still in contact with Emma? Victoria's face hardened. She grabbed my sleeve. "Do I give you permission to leave?" I chuckled nervously. "I don't want to disturb you two. I need to change my clothes." She chided, "Sebastian, do you think I'll let you leave my sight like this?" And so I was forcibly taken back to the hotel where Victoria and Tyler were staying. Entering the hotel, my heart pounded. I didn't want to barge into Victoria and Tyler's love nest, but oddly, they had booked 2 suites. Tyler shooed Victoria away. "Go do whatever you need to. I'll call you when I'm done." Victoria went back to her room. She paced restlessly in front of her door, utterly agitated. She just wanted to make sure I was all right inside. Tyler pushed me into the bathroom. He knocked on the door. "Sebastian, I left your clothes outside the door." He knocked several times but got no answer. He grew worried something had happened, so he cautiously opened the door a crack. Thankfully, I was fine, probably just engrossed in my shower. Tyler just breathed a sigh of relief and started to close the door, when his heart leaped into his throat. What had he seen? He was terrified and rushed out to find Victoria. He opened the door and jumped again. Victoria stood there like a vengeful spirit, her face grim. Seeing Tyler's frantic state, she frowned. "What's wrong?" Tyler pulled her aside and whispered anxiously, "Have you seen Sebastian's body?" Victoria flung his hand away, stamping her foot in anger. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Tyler stammered. "No, that's not what I meant. I just... What is it? Spit it out." He said, "I accidentally saw. Sebastian has many old scars on his abdomen, different depths and all jumbled up. What's going on? Was he injured or..." Victoria was also stunned. He had surgery a few years ago on his liver, but the incision was only one. Tyler looked worried. No, it definitely wasn't a surgical incision. It looked like someone slashed him with a knife. Even as he said it, he felt a jolt of fear. Victoria seemed to be struck by a blow, frozen in place, clearly unaware of anything. Tyler sighed. Has he had other girlfriends these past few years? Could it be that she's... He hesitated, unable to utter the word yandere. He felt Victoria was about to kill someone. She stormed into the room, grabbed Sebastian's phone and called Emma. Emma, oblivious to her impending doom, whined, "Where have you been? You're going to starve me to death." Victoria's whisper was like a demon from hell. She bit her lip. "Emma, where are you?" Emma paused only a moment before sneering, "St. Martin Hospital." After hanging up, Emma threw the phone back down, quickly heading for the exit, instructing someone, "Keep an eye on Sebastian. Don't let him leave until I get back." Half an hour later, a speeding car screeched to a halt at the hospital entrance. A woman radiating rage stepped out, causing everyone to instinctively step aside. She was terrifying. Only when she reached the ward did she smooth down her already disheveled hair. From the moment Victoria entered, Emma stared at her defiantly. Victoria surveyed the ward. There were many of Sebastian's belongings. Had he gone abroad, left America just to hide in this small ward, taking care of this cripple? Did this woman, this you, deserve him? Victoria could take it no more, unleashing her fury completely. She rushed to the bedside, grabbing Emma's shoulders. Emma, now incapacitated, would be no match for her in a fight. "Victoria, are you a murderer? If you do anything to me today, I will never forgive you." Victoria, panting, coldly scoffed, pushing her away. "If I wanted to, you'd die without a sound." Looking into her eyes, Emma had to admit that even though she had survived countless life or death struggles and family feuds, She was chilled to the bone by Victoria's ferocious hatred. Cold sweat broke out on Victoria's forehead. She raised her leg and kicked the hospital bed hard. Emma rubbed her neck and said, "You psycho." Victoria retorted, "What right do you have to call me that, you clingy little sister? I'm going to make you pay for what you did to Sebastian." Emma looked incredulous. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Victoria said, "Deny it if you dare. I'll give you one last chance. How did Sebastian get those wounds?" Emma's eyes went blank for a second. Then a look of horror spread across her face. Victoria, seeing this, became even more furious. Emma scoffed, "Want to know? Get on your knees and beg me." Victoria yelled, "Go to hell!" She was about to slap Emma again, but Emma's next word stopped her dead in her tracks. "It wasn't me," Emma said. "He did it to himself." "What?" Victoria staggered back, disbelieving. "What? What do you mean?" Emma was too tired to argue anymore. She paused, then said, "Sebastian has a mental illness. He's had it for years. After we moved to the States, he had an episode once. I saw him self-harming for so long. I thought he was better, but maybe in the times I wasn't watching, he was still suffering." Victoria felt a blow to the back of her head. Self-harming? The boy she'd watched grow up had that kind of illness. And even more infuriating, why hadn't she known all these years? Victoria screamed in despair, kicking over a bedside table. Emma sneered. "Painful? Helpless? Is that what you think? But do you know how helpless he's been for all these years?" Victoria choked out, "It's my fault. But why didn't he tell me?" Emma erupted. "Because he loves you. He loves you so much he wants to die. How could he tell you? He thinks he's a madman, afraid you'd reject him, afraid of becoming a burden to you. He'd rather hurt himself than hurt you, so he kept away from you." Victoria took a deep breath. Her voice was hoarse. "Did he tell you all this?" Emma replied, "Did he have to? I have eyes, I can see. Only someone as blind and foolish as you couldn't see it. And you kept parading your fiancé in front of him, letting him hurt himself. Have you ever seen his medication? Orange, olanzapine, for his illness." "Oh, that's it," she whispered. She remembered Emma saying he was moody and childish. He was sick, and she, a fool, hadn't noticed a single clue. Victoria couldn't stay. She had to see Sebastian immediately. The pain in her heart felt like it would kill her. She bowed slightly to Emma. "Thank you for telling me all this." Emma responded, "Just show some humanity and treat him well." Victoria merely nodded, said nothing, and turned to leave. Only when she was alone in the empty elevator did she realize she was crying. In the hotel room, after showering and changing into the clothes Tyler had prepared, I still felt uneasy. I sensed a subtle shift in Tyler's demeanor, and my anxiety returned. I didn't want to hear another one of his stories about how blissfully in love he and Victoria were. "Ed," I said through gritted teeth, "thank you. I have to go. I'll clean these clothes and return them, or if you don't want them back, I'll send you the money." Tyler shook his head. He poured me a cup of hot tea and pulled me down to sit. "Why so formal?" he asked. "You're making me feel unwelcome." He turned serious. "Sebastian, tell me about you and Victoria." I stiffened. "She hasn't told you?" Tyler, no longer concerned with Victoria's pursuit of her husband, said frankly, "I don't know her well. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. Besides this trip to Milan, I've only met her privately 3 times. My jaw dropped. I suddenly remembered Victoria mentioning a business marriage to her fiancé at a Japanese restaurant in the States. So that's how it was. Tyler chuckled. "Curious why I'm here in Milan for her, aren't you? Perhaps because Victoria wasn't around, or perhaps because I just learned about her lack of feelings for her fiancé. I was feeling a bit calmer." He'd hit the nail on the head. I felt embarrassed. "Yes," I mumbled. Tyler said bluntly, "I'm here to help her win back her husband." I saw how distraught she was, unable to take the initiative. I was utterly bewildered. "Husband," Tyler replied. She has someone she loves. You don't know. He's in America. They broke up years ago for some reason. She moved the company to America for him. She thought things would work out, but then he disappeared again. Victoria was so distraught she was drinking every night, crying until she soaked through several bedsheets. I couldn't help but laugh. Victoria doesn't have someone she loves in America. The only person she knows is me. My voice caught in my throat. Victoria couldn't possibly really love me, could she? Tyler helpfully chimed in. Wow, Sebastian, the more you talk about the person Victoria loves, the more it sounds like you. I hastily denied it. No, she just sees me as a child. It's impossible. Tyler pressed on. Why is it impossible? You're so amazing. Victoria's not stupid. She must see how great you are. I chuckled wryly. Maybe my exterior is presentable, but inside I'm broken and decaying. No one can save me. Before I could say anything else, a furious pounding on the door echoed. Tyler rushed to open it and saw Victoria looking utterly devastated. He was speechless. I slowly approached. Upon seeing me, Victoria couldn't contain herself and rushed towards me, hugging me fiercely. She murmured almost reverently, Sebastian. Tyler stood there open-mouthed. Hey, Victoria yelled, Get out, Tyler muttered. Fine, I'm out. He rolled his eyes and wisely left. Only Victoria and I remained. I was held tightly in her embrace. I felt uneasy, yet my body involuntarily craved the warmth. Victoria was practically soaking my clothes with her tears again. I was at a loss, her sobs growing louder. I patted her. What's wrong? What is it? Tell me, please don't do this. Victoria raised her head, her face etched with unspeakable pain. Then she began to lift my shirt. I quickly pushed her hands away. What are you doing? Victoria buried her face in my lap, as if trying to drain every tear from her lifetime. She cried, I know everything. It's my fault, but please don't punish me like this. Please. Let me see. Your scars. I was instantly petrified, unable to move, filled with a desire for self-destruction. She knew. While I was stunned, Victoria's trembling hands slowly lifted the hem of my shirt. A fleeting glance, then she burst into tears and turned away. We sat in silence for a long while. Then Victoria's expression turned serious. She said, Sebastian, from now on I'll always be with you. Whatever you want, I'll give you. If you're sick, I'll help you recover slowly. I'll make amends for any harm I've caused. I love you. You have feelings for me too, right? Don't leave me. I truly can't live without you. After a long pause, I found my voice. Victoria, I don't want your pity. She replied, It's not pity. It's the same love you have for me. Marrying Ethan was my foolishness. He shared many similarities with you, and being with him always reminded me of you, so I accepted him. At the time, I thought I would never love anyone else. The motorcycles, luxury cars, it was because you liked them too, and I wanted to make you happy when you saw them. Moving to Los Angeles was because you once mentioned wanting to go there when you were little. I wanted to please you. I bought a house in Los Angeles just like our family home, but then you disappeared without a word. Sebastian, I've done so many wrong things to you, but the worst was realizing my feelings for you so late. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. Over my clothes, she gently kissed my countless scars. At that moment, my soul trembled violently. I lost control of my emotions, choking out, Victoria, why did you come so late? Victoria, I missed you so much. Months later, the doors of America's most prestigious psychological counseling center opened, and I walked out smiling at Victoria. She took my briefcase, her brow furrowing slightly. I immediately protested. I told you not to do that. You're going to drive me crazy. Victoria looked at me. My expression was more vibrant and lively than before. She felt nothing but contentment. She carelessly draped her arm around me, tiptoed and kissed my lips. She said, Come on. I saw another pair of sneakers and some luxury cars and watches yesterday, and I couldn't resist buying them. They were delivered to the house just now. Let's go see them. I glared at her. How much did they cost? A little over $6 million. I was speechless. Victoria, you're impossible. She laughed. Ha, whatever you say. On the Champs-Élysées, lavender blossoms were in full bloom. A couple, nearly broken apart but ultimately reunited, walked hand in hand, their faces radiant with contentment.